Welcome to Board Gems. In this video, I'll be comparing side by side with commentary 1998's Medieval Merchant, published by Goldsieber, and 2018's Franchise from Queen Games, both designed by Christvart Conrad. Here they are side by side. The one on the left is of course an English edition co-published by Rio Grande Games, but the original was Goldsieber. I suppose nowadays that would look like a parody of a game from Germany in the 90s, showing some relatively upper class guy glowering at you. Do you want to be him, or do you just want to get his money? On the right, well, the much more colorful Franchise from Queen, which is in a standard square box for Queen, that is to say slightly thicker than the standard square boxes you find in games such as Ticket to Ride. Medieval Merchant being a standard big box Goldsieber. They are similar thicknesses. Goldsiebers are a little bit longer and narrower. The original is for 2 to 6 players, and is one of those gamery games that plays quite well at 6 actually. Franchise goes up to 5. That's a little bit disappointing. It's still nice to have games though that can play up to 6 when everybody wants to stay together. The original says ages 12 and up, which is fair. I think 10 and up is probably more accurate, but I can't imagine any 10-year-old getting excited about this. Franchise says 14 and up, but that's probably not related to maturity level and more of a signaling that this is not a toy for the purposes of getting it tested. Inside, both have cardboard inserts. Goldsieber cardboard inserts are notoriously thin. If you get a used copy, it's very common for them to be kind of warped or bent or torn, whereas Queen's is really solid cardboard. We're going to spend some time on the boards here. So on the left, Medieval Merchant, look at that beautiful beige, but also as you can see, it's a bit messy, right? There's routes going from all sorts of different places, but like there can be 2 cities which are close to each other that don't have a connection. Maybe there's a mountain range in the middle or something. I'm not familiar with this area of Europe. But also these numbers on the routes. So this game predates Power Grid, but it's similar in that if you want to build out from, say, one location to another, you have to pay the connection costs. And the numbers are all over the place. You are making a lot of change in Medieval Merchant. But look at the beige. Okay, looking over to Franchise, this board is huge. This is, well, it's the same size as Ticket to Ride anyway. You know, it's 6 squares, I guess you'd say, just like Ticket to Ride. Instead of each connection having its own cost, instead they have 5 different connections with the costs the same among all connections of that type. So those big pink lines are all $8. I think it's interesting because I think some people would find the one on the right easier to read, certainly in terms of figuring out the costs and everything, but the result looks messier to me than the old one. But it was a necessary change. You'll see each region has its own scoring details, which is different from the original, in which you just got bonus points for being in as many different regions as possible. Medieval Merchant rulebook is text heavy. No real big picture, unfortunately. It has lots of little pictures, but some people may have a hard time getting a big picture from the text. It's not a complicated game though, it's still easy to learn. It's got a little guide on the back. I like Queen rulebooks in general. They do a nice thing where they color code a lot of things. So like different sections are different colors, and it makes it easier to kind of follow the flow. A couple of variants on the back there. Money. I wonder what money in Germany in the year of our Lord 1524 actually looked like. I wonder if they were bills and if they were shades of beige like they are in this game. You're making a lot of change with this paper money, so it is annoying. If you're playing Medieval Merchant, I'm telling you right now, don't use this paper money, use poker chips. You're making a lot of change. Trust me, you'll be happier with poker chips. I am a fan of money in playing card form, which Queen does here and in some other games as well. I agree with people who don't like paper money, but I'm not really that much of a fan of cardboard tokens as money either. So I find using playing cards to be a nice in-between. They're nice, they're kind of generic looking and very obviously different colors for the different denominations. If Queen sold these separately, I'd consider buying them. I think these would work great in a lot of different games. Wooden pieces in the playing colors. On the bottom left are the 6 player colors of Medieval Merchant, one of which unfortunately is natural wood, which blends in nicely with the all beige board. I believe Goldseber had a second printing of their game in which they replaced this with black, but there was never a second printing of the English edition. So if you get the English edition of Medieval Merchant, this is what you're getting. Franchise is on the right. The houses are slightly larger, and there is also a natural wood, but it doesn't matter because the board is not beige, it's actually quite colorful. On the top, specific to franchise, are scoring tokens, that's the flat cylinders. The pawns are used to note which location you're expanding into. In Medieval Merchant, you would just use spare houses for that. First, let me talk about the bottom. It is possible to double actions. They're kind of doubler tokens. So Medieval Merchant, you can do it twice, and you use these sorts of, letters of permission from some magistrate or something. In Queen, each player gets 4, although it's slightly different for the number of players. That pink pawn is used when you want to double the action of expanding. So you'll use your player color pawn for one expansion, and then if you double it, you're using this pink pawn for the second expansion. On the top are player boards. They're mostly just used for player aids, as you can see on the bottom left, showing a turn structure. In general, the artwork and theming is really great in franchise. I do question the decision to have each player run a different type of business. That doesn't actually make any thematic sense to me. If a city has lots of burger joints and cafes, why does that mean there's less money for me when I bring in my auto repair shop? I just try to tell players, no, we're all the same industry. We're all burger shops, okay? You're McDonald's, I'm Burger King, you're Wendy's, you're A&W. Setup is kind of part of the game in a standard version of Medieval Merchant, in which these discs are dealt out among the players, and we take turns over the course of the first few turns putting these on the board and opening up the cities for business. You can see they're quite plain. You also notice they're all the same size. So in franchise, they're different sizes. The 2s and 3s are smaller, the 7s and 8s are larger. That's related to one of the 2 main differences. The other difference is you see the numbers on there. In Medieval Merchant, your income is based on the number of empty spaces in the city. So you would just count up all the empty spaces you were taking income from. They added numbers to Queen's discs, so that instead of adding up all the empty spaces, you are just looking at what is the largest number still visible and summing those up. The other difference is related to those differences in size tokens, because if we flip them over, you'll see discs that are the same size have the same back. So the 2s and 3s both show 2/3 on the back. This is for randomization during setup. You see, neither Medieval Merchant nor franchise has any randomness during the game. There's just a little bit of variation at the start. The variation in Medieval Merchant is the order the discs come out and open for business. The variability in franchise is you can mix up these discs. So each time you play, different cities will be valued 2, some will be valued 3, it might be different the next time. That's on the right. On the left, this is another difference in the Queen edition. There's 10 different regions, and they all have different scoring for first, second, and presence in the region. And each region has sort of its default scoring that you can use, but this is also something that you can mix up. So instead of printing it on the board, they have it on these tokens so that you can actually mix it up if you want to. These 2 things do not show the same thing, but I'm combining them into one slide, so there. That thing I just mentioned about scoring in the regions, one of the reasons they did that is to remove the necessity of this track. So one of the endgame conditions of Medieval Merchant is when all the towns on the board are filled up. There are 20 towns. Whenever somebody expands into a town, we mark it on the track, and when the track counts down from 20 to 0, then we know the game is over. In practice, it's easy to forget to update this, and then over the course of the game, you're checking the whole board anyway to see whether this track is actually accurate or not. Just looking at individual regions and counting the towns in those compared to the whole board is quite a bit easier, so franchise doesn't need this track. And on the right is an income chart, which is not necessary in Medieval Merchant because what you count is what you get, basically. But because all the numbers are smaller in franchise, you have this chart. So you count up the number of empty spaces and then look it up on the chart how much money you actually get. And this chart is different for 2, 3, 4, or 5 players. All right, thanks for watching. Take care. You know, older games like Medieval Merchant and Franchise, which is not so old, don't stop being good, etc., etc. Okay, take care.